The Department has an active risk management program aimed at controlling the tort liability problem by eliminating, or at the very least, reducing the number of potentially hazardous conditions that could lead to accidents and possibly lawsuits. The training course you are about to participate in is called Extra Eyes for Maintenance. It is one element of the risk management program. The main purpose of the course is to show you how you can help the department reduce its tort liability problem. A tort is defined as a wrongful civil, as opposed to criminal act from which an injury results. By injury, we mean an economic loss of some amount brought about by either property damage or actual physical injury or death. The injured person or persons may then sue to recover damages from those responsible for the wrongful act. For example, a property owner may be sued if a person falls and gets hurt on an icy sidewalk in front of the house. A doctor may be sued as a result of complications from surgery. And a public highway agency may be sued when the highway condition is considered to have contributed to a motor vehicle accident. This shows you how many tort liability claims have been filed against PennDOT, as well as the sizable amount of money that has been paid out to settle tort suits. Based on the number of open, that is, unsettled claims, PennDOT could be looking at a continued high payout cost over the next several years, even with an active risk management program in place. Once the full effect of this program begins to be felt, however, you should see the tort claim cost in Pennsylvania level off and, quite possibly, decrease. Regardless of how successful the risk management program is, however, tort-related suits are going to be filed and money is going to be paid out in claim settlements. Nevertheless, it should be possible to limit the payout rate to a level that does not represent a major drain on department resources. This gives you some idea of how the department could have used the money that has been paid out in tort claim settlements. The diversion of funds from roadway maintenance to settling tort claims hampers the department's ability to do its job properly. It is clear that almost anything is worth trying that can reduce the chance that a tort claim will be filed or, if filed, will result in smaller settlements. The specific objectives of the training are: 1, to make you familiar with a program for identifying and reporting deficiencies that are classified as being high-risk exposure conditions. 2, to inform you of the specific kinds of conditions that are emphasized in the program. And 3, to tell you how and where to report any serious deficiencies you have identified. First, you will get some background as to the reasons the program was developed. Then we will describe the specific high-risk exposure conditions you should look for, give you some general suggestions about how to increase the chances of recognizing a specific problem location, provide some guidelines about accurately specifying the location of any deficiencies you find, and tell you the procedure for reporting deficiencies. Why is this training course called Extra Eyes for Maintenance? Although maintenance performs regular and frequent inspections of all state highways, it is not possible for the inspectors to be everywhere all of the time. Because of this, and because the tort problem is so severe, the department believes that all of its employees can actively help reduce tort liability by acting as extra eyes to aid maintenance in locating deficiencies. Most of you regularly travel on state highways, either going to and from work or while doing your jobs. Thus, if everyone looks for and reports any serious deficiencies, maintenance is likely to know about them sooner than might otherwise be the case. This program supplements normal maintenance inspection procedures. Rapid identification and correction of these problems can prevent serious accidents and reduce the amount of money the department is now spending for tort claim settlements. When we refer to serious roadway deficiencies, we are concerned with those that are likely to have occurred very recently. This is the major emphasis in the Extra Eyes program. Some examples are a severe shoulder washout that may have occurred during a rainstorm the night before you discover it, a section of guide rail that was struck in a recent accident, an important warning sign that has been knocked down. These are the kind of problems that maintenance may not find out about for several days unless they are reported by the police or by a private citizen something you cannot always count on. No one can promise that every deficiency you or anyone else reports to maintenance will be corrected immediately. In most counties, the available resources are not sufficient to correct all of the problems known to exist. Each maintenance manager is faced with the difficult task of having to decide which of a number of known problems must take priority. The fact that the condition you reported was not fixed right away simply means that there were other deficiencies that had to be corrected first. It certainly does not mean that maintenance has ignored your report. By now you have heard the term high-risk exposure conditions used several times. There is good reason for using that term to describe the deficiencies that will be emphasized here. They are the conditions that have been found from experience to expose the department to a high risk of a costly tort suit. The 8 items listed are the conditions that we will focus on today. Some of the conditions, such as traffic sign problems, are fairly widespread and are therefore more likely to be encountered. Others, such as impact attenuator problems, occur mostly in urban areas and may never be encountered if you live and work in a rural county. Now that you have some idea of the types of high-risk conditions that are of concern, we will describe and illustrate the specific things that we want you to look for and report. Although certain conditions are emphasized in the training program, that does not mean that you should only report those things we cover here. Each of you has to be the final judge of what to report. If you see a condition that you believe is a hazard and may cause an accident, report it. What we will describe during the course are guidelines for identifying those conditions that are important from a safety and a tort standpoint. We know that some conditions are more difficult to detect under normal driving circumstances than are others. Shoulder drop-offs are a good example of this. A drop-off that is 4 inches deep and extends for 50 feet qualifies as a deficiency to maintenance, but it is a very difficult deficiency to detect when you are driving at normal speeds. We mention this now because we do not want you to think that we are suggesting that you drive very slowly or stop on a roadside to observe or measure the severity of a deficiency to help you decide whether or not to report it. This could end up causing more accident problems than the deficiency itself. Furthermore, detection of some conditions requires specialized knowledge or training. An example of this is missing signs. We know that this is a significant tort liability problem. However, except for stop signs that you knew to be at the location before, or signposts that obviously have a sign missing, no one expects you to know where signs should be located. The determination that a specific location requires signing takes some analysis and frequently an engineering study. Before we take a look at the specific kinds of conditions you should report, there is one very important aspect of the reporting process that we want to emphasize: accurately identifying the location of any deficiency you discover so that maintenance can find it. Problems can occur if the location of a deficiency is not given accurately when it is reported. In one tort suit, the case was settled because maintenance fixed a pothole, different than the one that was called in and recorded. The caller either provided inaccurate information or information that was too vague to permit maintenance to find the actual deficiency that was reported. If the deficiency is not near convenient references, such as landmarks, intersections, station or segment markers, unique signs, or any feature that will provide maintenance with a way of finding a site, you can look at your odometer when you see the deficiency and report the distance between the deficiency and the next nearest reference point. This shows the state route and segment markers now used to mark all state routes. You will find these markers at many intersections. Here are both the new markers and the older type station marker. Reporting a condition with reference to one of these types of markers is probably the best means for maintenance personnel to find a condition because nearly all maintenance activities use them. As many of you know, there is a pothole hotline program that the department operates every spring. This program gives the public a way to tell maintenance about the existence of bad potholes. This is done by a call-in program using widely published telephone numbers for reaching county maintenance offices to report potholes that have recently appeared. The Extra Eyes program acts as a supplement to the existing hotline program. In addition to potholes, you should also look for and report depressions in the pavement, the kind that may result when a pavement partially collapses. Depressions can occur from long-term deterioration or when a poor job of patching has been done. Even though a faulty patch may have been done by a utility or land developer under permit, the department might find itself involved in a tort suit if an accident related to the pavement depression occurs. Let's take a look at several examples of the type of conditions we want you to report. Here's a pothole we hope you'll never encounter. Why would the driver have hit such a large pothole rather than trying to avoid it? It certainly looks obvious enough. However, it's possible that the driver couldn't tell how deep the hole really was because it was filled with water. Or perhaps there was no way to avoid it without hitting another vehicle. These are more typical potholes, and that's about all that needs to be said about them. It's frequently difficult to tell how deep a pothole is when you just see it at normal driving speed. However, as mentioned, if it jolts your car badly when you hit it, or if it looks bad enough that you believe you should avoid it, it's worth reporting. Here is a similar problem that resulted from a pavement collapse. The chance of a pavement collapse and depression like this occurring over a short period of time is not great, but if you see something this severe, you should certainly report it. The reasons why bad potholes, pavement depressions, or sinkholes should be reported and as soon as possible are: 1, if they are hit, the driver may lose control of the vehicle. 2, if it is necessary to swerve to miss them, it may cause interference with oncoming traffic or with a following vehicle that is in the process of passing. And 3, if there is a rapid slowdown or stop in a place where a following driver did not expect it, a rear-end collision could result. If a pothole or pavement depression looks dangerous to you, report it. There are 3 types of shoulder defects that we will be talking about: drop-offs, erosion, and washouts. A shoulder drop-off is simply a location where the shoulder has been worn away until it is lower than the adjacent pavement. Many of the accidents associated with drop-offs are caused when a driver drifts off the road onto the lower shoulder. In trying to recover from this situation, the driver oversteers and either loses control and runs off the far side of the roadway or hits an oncoming vehicle in the other lane. Here are typical shoulder drop-off problems. As you can see, there is a sizable drop that could cause serious control problems if the driver tried to return to the roadway too quickly. Next, some of the difficulties involved in detecting shoulder drop-offs. Here is a passenger's eye view of the approach to a fairly severe drop-off. As you can see, it is hard to tell how bad the drop-off really is. However, as you can see here, the drop-off is definitely severe enough to cause a problem if a car's wheels were to drop from the edge of the pavement to the shoulder. We want you to report serious shoulder drop-off problems, but they are hard to identify when driving at normal roadway speeds. Don't even think of driving very slowly or stopping to determine whether a drop-off is severe enough to report. That is far too dangerous. Erosion is a wearing away of an unpaved shoulder by little rivers of water runoff, resulting in a ditch. This is a close-up of a serious erosion condition. Shoulder erosion is a concern because once it starts, it only gets worse. Once erosion begins, it can, under the right conditions, change from a small problem to a big problem very quickly. This is the approach to the eroded shoulder site we saw. As you can see, a bad erosion problem is not always easy to detect from a distance. However, in this case, the difference in the color of the shoulder surface gives you some idea that there may be a problem. As you see here, the erosion is severe and is right at the edge of the paved surface. Furthermore, it is on a curve, which is the most dangerous place to have a serious shoulder erosion condition. This closer view of the erosion gives you a better idea of the depth of the depression. As you might imagine, a wheel getting trapped in a section this deep would make it almost impossible for a driver to maintain control of the vehicle and return safely to the roadway. The final type of shoulder defect we will talk about is a shoulder washout. This is a situation where the shoulder collapses because the supporting earth under the shoulder is washed away. Here is a fairly typical washout. Maintenance discovered this one and put up a barricade to warn drivers until the condition could be corrected. A washout such as this may appear without any previous indication of the problem because the ground supporting the shoulder and out of sight of the roadway could be wearing away for a long period of time. A condition such as this is much less visible to the unsuspecting driver at night, so maintenance must be informed quickly so the problem can be fixed or the location temporarily marked. Isolated icy spots and water cause accidents and produce tort claims. Look for water running onto or across the roadway or water ponding on the road after a rain. This indicates a drainage problem that should be brought to the attention of maintenance. In the winter, if you see an icy spot, report it so that maintenance can inspect it to determine if a sign should be erected to warn drivers of the ice problem. The types of guide rail condition to report are those that are severe. A hole in a section large enough that a vehicle could go through, or a section that has been bent over so far that a vehicle could vault the guide rail. Perhaps even more than the other conditions, the primary concern with guide rail are conditions that have occurred very recently. For example, the night before. Here is a gap or hole in the section that would easily permit a vehicle to go down over the bank. Here is a long section of cable and post guide rail that has been hit and knocked down. It doesn't matter whether the guide rail is of the old type like this or the newer type. If you see a section that a vehicle could go through, report it. Another guide rail problem is one in which the initial hit was not severe enough to put a hole in the section, but bent the guide rail so badly that another vehicle hitting it might fall over it. If you see a section of guide rail that looks dangerous, report it. A review of tort claims indicates that about 12% are associated with traffic signs. As mentioned earlier, some signing problems are difficult to identify without specialized training and experience. Did you know that warning signs are diamond-shaped and usually black on yellow, while regulatory signs look very different? You should have little difficulty detecting obscured signs, conflicting signs, missing signs, and damaged or defaced signs. Each of these can result in the loss of a tort suit. The first is one that probably occurs most frequently and is the most easily detected: signs obscured, either partially or almost totally by trees or bushes. While partially obscured signs may not pose an immediate problem because the driver can still make out the message, they should be reported because maintenance can then schedule the needed brush cutting. Which types of sign conditions should be reported? You will have to decide based on your judgment of what might happen to an unfamiliar driver who does not receive the information provided by the sign. A typical case is where the speed advisory plate of a curve warning sign is covered by brush. Would an unfamiliar driver who misses the speed advisory be likely to enter the curve at too high a speed, be surprised by the sharpness, and possibly lose control? If you are very familiar with a road, you probably know from experience where all of the curves are located and how fast you can safely drive them. You know where all the intersections are located, etc. However, an unfamiliar driver must rely on a view of the road and assigning information to know these things. Here's the approach to a fairly sharp left turn. The speed advisory plate is obscured. As you get closer to the sign, the speed advisory becomes visible. However, it is not visible until you are much closer to the turn. Therefore, you cannot just ask yourself whether the sign can be seen, but also whether it can be seen far enough ahead to give an unfamiliar driver enough time to read the message and take the necessary action. A stop sign that is hidden or obscured must be reported. At this intersection, the stop sign is obscured. It is very difficult to locate the sign. It's that little patch of red just to the right of the middle of the photograph. Stop signs are the most critical signs on a road. Anytime you see an obscured or hidden stop sign, report it. Here, the curb sign is visible, but the speed advisory is hidden. This is a frequent problem because speed advisory plates are mounted below the sign, and it doesn't take too much growth to hide them. This is a similar situation, but with part of the sign itself being obscured. In this case, drivers can see most of the sign, and the signals ahead sign is fairly unique. Since most of the sign can be seen, most drivers would get the message. However, at some point, the foliage may hide too much of the sign to get a driver's attention. You are 170 feet from an intersection, traveling at 45 miles per hour. Do you feel threatened? No. Now you are 70 feet from the intersection and just 1.5 seconds from the stop sign you couldn't see. One more time. If you were familiar with the road, you knew you had to stop. But what about the unfamiliar driver? The key to reporting sign deficiencies requires that you put yourself in the position of that unfamiliar driver. Conflicting signs, simply defined, is where the driver can see more than one sign giving contradictory information. Here, the speed limit for the road and an advisory speed for a curve or turn. Should the curve be driven at 35 or 25? If you are familiar with the road, you know. The unfamiliar driver does not. Next, missing signs. A sign may be missing because it was knocked down or stolen. In terms of a tort claim, however, a sign may be considered missing because it had never been installed in the first place. The missing stop sign. If you come to an intersection that you know had a stop sign and the sign is missing, report it immediately. Even if you're not in familiar territory, but you come to an intersection which looks like it should have a stop sign and has an empty sign post, as this one does, report it. It is highly unlikely that an intersection like this would be uncontrolled. Most intersections of paved roadways in the state are either stop or signal controlled. If the stop sign post is bent over from a collision, that should be reported too. The stop sign is sufficiently critical, both from a safety and a tort standpoint, that any such situation should be reported as soon as possible. This is the same intersection with the stop sign back in place. Here is an obvious missing sign situation where you see a post that had previously contained a sign. The speed advisory plate is still mounted, so you can be certain there once was a curve or turn warning sign. Again, report it. Damaged signs refers to signs that are damaged, defaced, or deteriorated. Spray paint is a frequent problem in some areas. Here, enough of the red area of the sign is painted over that at night it might not even look like a stop sign from a distance. Because of the importance of stop signs, this should be reported. Damage to other types of signs, particularly warning signs, should also be reported if you believe that the message is not readable. Here is a defaced regulatory sign that should be reported. If an accident occurred at a site such as this, the department would most likely be held liable because the sign message was not fully visible. Even if a defaced sign is not actually the cause of an accident, it could be the cause for the loss of a tort case. The work zone conditions of primary interest for this program are those involving obvious signing problems. The work zone situation is complicated by the fact that in some cases it is not maintenance personnel who have created the dangerous condition. Some of the problems occur when utility or television cable companies set up short-term work zones. Because of this, poor work zone signing practices are difficult for maintenance to monitor and control. The Extra Eyes program can be a great help in identifying those outside agencies that do not provide adequate traffic control setups. You see on the right the typical work zone ahead sign, but no indication of any activity. This sort of situation can occur when there is a fairly rapidly moving work activity and the crew fails to move the sign as work progresses downstream. This sign alerts the driver to the fact that something may change. That is, a flagger may be encountered and a stop may be required. The problem here is that the driver, after a certain period of time, may assume that all work activity is over and will no longer be on the lookout for a flagger or the work crew. If there are certain utility or cable companies that regularly violate the rules of safe work zone signing, a series of reports from department employees may help to identify the offenders, and something can be done about the situation. Remember that even though the department may not be causing the problem, if an accident occurs and a tort suit is filed, the department could be involved. We have talked about the situation where foliage blocked traffic signs. Another situation in which foliage can result in a hazard is where it reduces the sight distance at an intersection to the point where it is not possible for the driver to see far enough ahead to make a decision as to whether it is safe to enter or cross the intersection. In many such cases, the intersection has adequate sight distance when there is no foliage. But during spring and summer, trees, bushes, or even crops can produce a severe sight distance restriction. The hazard of such a condition is obvious. The last condition we will look at is damaged impact attenuators, also known as crash cushions. Because of their effectiveness, impact attenuators can sometimes be hit without resulting in personal injury or severe damage to a vehicle. When this happens, the driver often leaves without reporting the incident. In such cases, maintenance has no way of knowing that an accident occurred and that the attenuator was damaged. An attenuator left in a partially collapsed state becomes much less effective should someone else run into it. A second hit of the same magnitude as the first could result in a serious injury or a fatality. Since maintenance may not have been informed because the first accident involved only property damage, any impact attenuator damage should be reported. As you approach this impact attenuator, you cannot tell that it has been hit. However, as you get closer, the damage becomes obvious. You can now see the extent of the damage to the attenuator. Clearly, it would be ineffective if hit by another vehicle. You now have a good idea as to why you are being asked to provide extra eyes for the department in general and for maintenance in particular. We know this program cannot replace the maintenance inspection process, but it can help discover serious problems earlier. All of you can serve as extra eyes and save the department money that can be spent to improve our roadways. Before closing this part of the training session, there's just one more thing we would like to discuss. There are certain problems that do not occur very frequently and have not been prominent in the tort picture, but which can be hazardous. If you see boulders, a blown down tree or large branches, or any large objects on or near the roadway, report it to maintenance. Problems such as this may occur during a storm and are not the kind of things that will be identified quickly with the normal inspection process. Unless someone calls maintenance, they have no way of knowing that such a hazard exists. Do not assume that someone else has called. If you live in a more urban area and see a manhole or catch basin cover displaced or missing on a state highway, report that too. As we said earlier, if you see anything that you think is dangerous and could cause an accident, call maintenance and tell them about it. We'll tell you the procedure for reporting in a few minutes. Many times when we drive a highly familiar route, we look but don't really see. We are so familiar with what is around us that we don't really pay attention to it. We are not suggesting that you go out of your way to search for deficiencies, only that you pay a little more attention to the roadway, roadside, and signs when you are driving. If you drive with that in mind, you'll be surprised at how much more you will see. We have talked about some cases that involved rather easily detected and easily corrected deficiencies, which ended up costing the department hundreds of thousands of dollars in tort claim settlements. If only one of all the employees who drove the routes on which those deficiencies occurred would have seen and reported the deficiency, maintenance may have been able to make the correction in time to prevent the accident. No one would have been hurt, and a great deal of money would have been saved. While we have been stressing cost and the fact that the savings could be put to better use, the most important aspect of the identification program is safety. A serious deficiency that is reported and corrected may prevent a fatality or serious injury. Enhancing safety and preventing torts are one and the same thing. You can help on both counts if you report any deficiencies you see. Remember, the most important thing after identifying a deficiency is to accurately specify where it is located, using the kind of references mentioned before: station or segment markers, landmarks, intersections, unique signs, or any feature that will provide maintenance with a way of finding the site. Segment and station markers like these are the references most useful to maintenance. Provide the information to maintenance as soon as possible. If you see a problem on the way to work in the morning and call as soon as you get to work, it may be possible to get the information to a crew or an individual who would normally be heading to the area. In some cases, a county maintenance unit will not have a 24-hour phone for receiving information. If the county to which you are reporting does have 24-hour service, And if the deficiency is discovered on your way home from work, call it in when you get home rather than waiting until morning. Remember, some types of deficiencies, such as shoulder washout, are more difficult to see at night. Even though maintenance cannot correct the deficiency immediately, they can get to the site to put up a barricade and flashers to warn drivers of the hazard. When you find a condition that should be reported, call the county maintenance office of the county where the condition was found. This is the most efficient way in that it avoids any middleman. That is, someone who would have to take the call and then transfer the information to the county maintenance office. One of the sheets that you will receive today contains the telephone numbers of the county maintenance office and, if available, the emergency numbers that can be used after working hours. The other sheets describe the information you should give to the person who answers the telephone. We can summarize the program with these 3 key points. In your normal driving, try to become more aware of the roadway and roadside so that you are more likely to find severe high-risk exposure conditions like those described today. When you find a reportable condition, make sure you can accurately describe the location. Call the condition report into the county maintenance office as soon as possible after you see the deficiency. From now on, please pay a little more attention to the roadway and roadside. It won't take much of your time, and it could have great payoff.